Some women repay a parent's love with murderous betrayal. A daughter's dark side casts its shadow over 3 generations.
Her temper was insanely hot compared to other people.
A love-struck student can't accept that mother knows best.
This relationship between them, this really close relationship, became quite tense and quite rocky.
And the home chemist mixes a remedy to put Dad in his place.
It was an act of ultimate betrayal.
Ventnor, New Jersey, 2016. 40-year-old Heather Barbera loves being the center of attention on social media.
Heather was very shallow. She got a boost to her ego by posting sexy pictures of herself on networks for everybody to see.
Her many loyal followers include her mother, Michelle.
We look at what her mother posted and we see a doting, loving mother.
Heather posts a picture-perfect life. But in the real world, she's a troubled woman.
Many people that knew her described her as fragile, that her temper was insanely hot compared to other people.
What took you so long, little bro?
Good things happen to those that wait.
Her temper is fueled by a drug habit. Something she shares with her younger brother, Robbie.
There was a lot of drugs, there was alcohol, gambling, and all kinds of terrible things going on.
And that led to a seedy underbelly that she started rolling around in.
Her lifestyle costs Heather her marriage and her 2 children.
It's unusual for a young mother with young children, to not have full custody or at least half custody, but that is what happened to Heather. She lost custody.
Don't tell Mom you were here.
Hell no.
She always had emotional problems, but once there was the divorce and she lost custody of her children, then she really started to go downhill.
Your favorite.
Thanks, Grandma.
Heather's mom, 65-year-old Michelle Gordon, is the rock of the family. She's always there for her daughter and grandchildren.
Oh, not around the food.
Her mother was supportive of her. Heather said that her mother was her backbone.
Every time I see them, they're inches taller.
That's what happens when you're a part-time mom.
It's not my fault.
Never is.
Michelle dishes out tough love to try and get her daughter back on the straight and narrow.
Heather and her mother had a very complex, contentious relationship. They knew how to push each other's buttons, and they would do it.
Be good for Grandma.
Bye, Mom.
You look so pretty today.
Thanks, Mommy.
Let's go to the fair.
But you don't have enough money.
Who told you that?
Nanny.
It doesn't take much to ignite Heather's temper, even the innocent words of her young daughter.
Once they divorced, her husband retained a nanny to look after the children full-time.
What did you say to my daughter?
Heather, is that you?
You told her I don't have any money.
Heather got it in her head that the nanny had turned the child against her.
She's my child.
And she had to pay for that.
How dare you?
Heather called the nanny and screamed and yelled at her, but it wasn't enough to just call her and say that.
Heather pushed her way in, and she was a maniac.
She started beating up the nanny, including knocking her to the ground, kicking her, and she did this in front of her children. In fact, it was her daughter that called 911.
The nanny had black eyes, contusions. I mean, she was totally traumatized by this event.
Heather pleads guilty to simple assault. It works in her favor.
Heather got 2 years probation, not one single day in jail. When someone gets away with a crime of that nature, essentially the court just gave that person a pass on their next attack.
To the online world, 40-year-old Heather Barbera lives a glamorous life. But in reality, she's divorced, lost custody of her kids, and is on probation. Then in 2018, another tragedy. Her younger brother, Robbie, dies of a drug overdose.
Heather was devastated.
I can't believe it. He was a beautiful boy.
Michelle was also devastated to lose her son. So it was a type of incident that just exacerbated all the problems that the family had.
Can I get you something to drink?
Haven't you done enough?
You're blaming me?
The tragedy should bring the family together, but instead, it tears them apart.
Almost like Heather had injected him with the drugs. Almost like Heather had killed him. Heather was never able to live that down. Every chance her mother got, she brought it up.
Your mother's just upset.
Despite their differences,
Heather, get in here.
the two women try and live under the same roof.
I told you, when you moved in, there were rules. Whatever.
Along with a third generation, 87-year-old grandmother, Elaine Rosen.
Please try, Heather. I am.
Heather was in a jam as to where to live. She didn't have any money, she wasn't working.
So this situation was totally toxic. They were arguing, they were fighting with each other, they had been physically violent. So it was definitely a situation that was getting worse and worse.
No, darling, no one's like you. Yeah, I do. I like Josh.
Heather still has an expensive drug habit, so she starts stealing money from her mom.
Oh, yeah, I know.
What this was, it was kind of a powder keg. You have the spark, Heather, and you have the keg of powder, the mom, meeting. All you need is one little spark, and that thing's gonna blow.
On July 7th, 2018, just weeks after Heather moves in, mother and daughter have the ultimate showdown.
Oh, for God's sake, I've had enough of your nonsense, Heather. You just walked in here, you treat this place like a hotel.
I can't say anything right.
You are stealing from us.
You can afford it.
Your uncle is right, you have to leave.
I'm not leaving till you give me some love. I need love from you. Why didn't you tell me this morning you were gonna give it?
Heather started beating on her mother.
Heather's late father was a policeman. His treasured police baton now becomes a weapon.
When she started, she couldn't stop herself. She had to kill her mother.
When her elderly grandmother, Elaine, tries to intervene, she too becomes a victim.
It's shocking. It's just absolutely shocking that she could do something like this.
I think at the time Heather turned on her grandmother, she was probably in a blind rage.
And it is a bloody, gruesome, horrific scene.
Heather leaves the blood, but cleans up the valuables.
She kneels down and she takes the actual jewelry off of her mother and grandmother's hands.
She also steals their cash and credit cards and goes to New York to celebrate.
It doesn't surprise me that Heather ran to New York to party. Abusers fantasize about the person they hate being dead. It was party time. Mom was dead.
But her party is on borrowed time. Heather's a wanted woman, but it doesn't stop her going on a spending spree from New Jersey to New York.
Not the smartest killer on record here. Heather was using her mother and grandmother's credit cards, so literally, police could see exactly where she went, when she went, after the murders. This case was not hard to put together. Did not take Columbo to solve.
Heather drains the life from her mother and grandmother and drains their bank accounts. But it gets her nowhere. In 2019, Heather Barbera pleads guilty to aggravated manslaughter and first-degree murder.
The community was absolutely floored. Yes, it was shocking. I mean, the idea that a woman could brutally beat her mother and grandmother, it was just totally shocking.
Heather is sentenced to 42 years. She will be eligible for parole in 2058.
It's a good thing she's off the streets, because let me tell you something. You are a danger to society. If you can kill your own mother and grandmother, you're capable of killing anybody.
For Heather, appearances are everything. She lived a superficial life where family came last.
Heather Barbera could be the poster girl for why drugs are a terrible thing. All signs pointed one way. It would have been hard for the police to keep a straight face. This is why teenagers rarely get away with murder.
In the leafy suburbs of Brisbane, on the east coast of Australia, 54-year-old Macedonian immigrant Radika Zawarovska and her only child Simona are a tight unit.
Radika worked as a cleaner to support Simona. Simona really was the apple of her mother's eye. She was quite spoiled.
Simona.
What?
I do this all day, every day. So you don't have to, my beautiful girl.
Radika was the classic example of an immigrant from Eastern Europe going to a first world country and devoting everything, time, energy, and money to their children.
Cleaning jobs help put Simona through college to ensure a bright future.
She was studying full-time to be a teacher at a local university. Radika had given her everything she wanted. She financially supported her.
But there are some things a mother can't give a young woman.
Hello?
Mama,
Simona!
I'm having such a great time.
Oh, that's good, my darling.
I think I'm going to stay a while longer.
But what about uni?
No, uni doesn't go back for weeks.
Simona didn't want to return to school.
Okay.
So she told her mother school wasn't starting when her mother thought it was.
I love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Perhaps we could celebrate?
Simona was young. She was only 20, and I guess she was quite short-sighted. Studying seemed to be the furthest thing from her mind.
But Simona's future is always on her mother's mind.
You can't even wait for coffee.
When does Simona get back?
A couple more weeks.
But uni goes back next week.
Are you sure? That girl, she lied to me.
And when Radhika discovers the truth, tensions arise.
Mama? You lied to me, Simona?
Mama, please.
You come home now, or there's no more money, okay?
Please.
Her mother demanded that Simona return to Australia and resume her studies.
Now I said, Simona.
If she didn't, her mother said she would cut her off financially.
I think she met a boy. No. I tell her you finish school first. After boys.
Simona obeys her mother and returns home, but the mother-daughter bond is strained.
This relationship between them, this really close relationship, became quite tense and quite rocky.
Radhika didn't want her daughter to come back just because she wanted Simona with her. She wanted her daughter to come back so she wouldn't ruin her future.
Simona sees it differently.
Do you want a sandwich?
She wanted the man of her dreams over in Macedonia, and her mother was the one standing in the way of achieving that dream.
Simona. I only want what is best for you.
Yeah, well, you're ruining my life.
She was not happy. In fact, she was seething at her mother.
But Simona thinks she has a way out. Financially, she holds the cards. Her mother has put her house in her daughter's name.
It had been transferred into Simona's name by Radhika prior to remarrying. Radhika did that to protect the assets in the event of a subsequent divorce, and it turned out there was a divorce subsequent. And so that was done to protect the asset. The house was worth high 700s, 780,000, something like that.
Simona starts to make plans around that asset. Plans that don't involve her mother.
I intend to rent out the house, so I want to know how much I can borrow.
She actually went to a bank and asked about the mortgage on her property.
How much rent were you expecting to get?
Around $750 a week.
She actually told the bank manager that she planned on moving over to Macedonia, that she had plans to rent the house out.
Based on the figures you gave me, looks like you can borrow approximately $175,000. Does that sound okay?
That sounds perfect.
The bank manager told her she could borrow up to $175,000. That's a lot of money for a girl in love.
I'll get you to sign there.
There is only one thing standing between Simona and her happiness. Her mother.
She wanted what would have been her inheritance someday, but she wanted it now.
You'll get the money within a couple of days.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
In Brisbane, Australia, Radhika Zavarovska is a mother who knows best. But her daughter, Simona, doesn't appreciate her tough love.
Can't you sleep either? I haven't slept since you dragged me back here.
Simona's mother wanted her daughter to have a good life and finish her studies.
I'm only doing what is best for you, Simona.
But Simona wanted something else.
For Simona, her mother was what was standing in the way of her living the life that she wanted to lead.
On October 28, 2016, Simona has a simple but brutal plan to fix the problem.
Greed, thy name is Simona. Simona had prepared a plank of wood. In the early hours of that morning, Simona went into her mother's bedroom. And she started beating her mother in the face and head.
I suspect she thought that she would strike her once and that would be it. But then when there's a response, she's just continued and continued and continued.
She hit her no less than 20 times. She wanted her mother dead, dead, dead.
Simona plans to get away with murder.
What's your emergency? There's someone in my house. I can hear footsteps on the wooden floor.
But her behavior is suspicious from the beginning.
It was about 7 a.m. that Simona made a very curious call claiming there were intruders in the home.
Okay. Is there anyone else there with you?
My mother.
The operator asked her if it was maybe just your mother making these noises.
I can hear them talking.
She said that she knew it was not her mother.
I can hear them. I think they're coming towards my room.
If you put yourself in that situation, you did hear footsteps and muffled voices and knew your mother was home.
I can't hear them talking anymore.
Why would you suddenly assume that it was intruders in your home? She never speaks about hearing her mother screaming or needing help.
I can hear the intercom.
Whatever way you look at it, it doesn't make sense.
On arrival, the police soon find the horrific scene.
It's the most violent murder I've ever seen. They've located Radhika deceased in her bed with significant injuries to her face, significant enough that they believe that it was a gunshot wound.
You okay?
Simona isn't informed of the grisly find.
I heard noises from over there.
So when first questioned, her behavior continues to arouse suspicion.
And she's not asking me about how her mother is, where her mother is, that sort of thing. It was something at the time that I thought was unusual.
While there is no physical evidence to link Simona to the murder, it seems she cleans up a little too well.
Simona's appearance was unusual because her hair was particularly blow-dried and styled as if she was about to go out on a night out on the town. According to her version of events, she was asleep and then subsequently hiding under a blanket while intruders were in the house.
And the crime scene looks staged.
Simona tried to stage a crime scene, that there had been a home invasion. However, she left cash and jewelry untouched.
But Simona's biggest mistake is where she hides the weapon.
The crime officer located the murder weapon underneath a bookcase within Simona's bedroom.
We found this hidden in your bedroom.
The killer must have put it there when I was asleep.
I find that really hard to believe, Simona.
I don't know.
When the police asked her how did that bloody plank get behind her bookcase, she said, "Oh, well, I guess the killers must have come in my room and put it behind there." Absurd. It would have been hard for the police to keep a straight face.
This way, please.
Simona was arrested.
In 2019, Simona Zawarovska is convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 20 years.
This was a particularly brutal crime and very unusual because Simona was so young, only 20 years old. She had no criminal history.
A devoted mother, everything Radica ever did was for the benefit of Simona and her future.
I don't believe Radica would have ever suspected or thought that it could end up ending in such a horrific way for her.
Simona decided, instead of taking her mother's advice, she would simply take her life.
If Simona wanted only to be with this older man, she could have done that. She could have said, well, Mom, I'm not coming home. But that wasn't good enough for Simona. She wanted the money. This was a murder motivated by greed. This case is a real brain teaser. You're dead to me. My past with you is dead to me. Oftentimes at the root of this is abuse, neglect, or serious mental illness. None of that was going on here.
Federal Heights, Colorado, 2013.
Hun, you want to catch a movie?
39-year-old Dana Jennings finds love, but not the traditional kind.
Dana was outgoing. She liked a lot of unconventional things, and one of those things was sex.
Dana is a loving partner to Chris.
Is it full of sordid sex?
Hope so.
And to his wife.
You guys.
All right, I'll go. If we celebrate later.
A night to remember.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we skip the film.
No way. No way.
They really were having almost a type of a polygamous relationship where Chris was the husband for both, all under the same roof as one family.
After 3 failed attempts at conventional marriage, with a husband and a wife, Dana enjoys the best of both worlds.
So basically they were playing husband and wife and wife.
You do that, come on.
6 months later, the cozy love triangle goes pear-shaped. Dana finds 3 really is a crowd.
You okay?
Yeah, just a little anxious.
You want a massage? Maybe later.
A trained masseuse and home chemist,
I think I can help.
Dana's keen to put her skills to good use.
Simply mentioning that you were anxious about something, she would run to her little laboratory and put something together. Dana considered herself quite the alchemist.
Dana's got just the thing to take care of the other wife.
So Dana whipped up this homeopathic remedy. It was known to have a side effect of causing psychotic episodes.
What is it? Just something to help you relax. I take it all the time.
Oh.
It's worth it.
Dana wasn't stupid. She would have known that a certain amount of this potion could do damage, could cause psychosis.
She started to hallucinate. She didn't feel well. She ended up in the hospital.
What happened? Talk to me! What happened?
I have no idea.
I think it was to move her out of the relationship that they were having.
It works. Chris divorces his wife and marries Dana. But hefty alimony payments leave Chris cash poor.
Chris was paying her a substantial amount in alimony, which really kind of pushed their finances to the breaking point.
The newlyweds are forced to move in with Dana's 65-year-old father, Bill Musak.
Her and her father were very close. He was always there to take care of her, and she would reach out to him when she was having troubles in life.
Dana was always a daddy's girl. He was good to her. He seemed to put up with anything she did.
Can you give me some space?
Why don't I go get a couple of beers, huh?
You're the best.
Living with her father doesn't change Dana's ways. Soon she is back to her old sexual games.
You're alone? Well, hello.
Despite their marriage and the threesomes ultimately destroyed Chris's first marriage, they still continued to have threesomes with other people.
But there is one condition. Dana must always be involved in the sexual encounters. If Chris goes it alone, that's cheating.
And you are the worst person in the world.
Oh, I'm the worst person in the world.
I could say worse.
Go on.
And it was very much a roller coaster relationship. And that's the way she was with most people.
Say what you want to say.
You're cheating on me.
Dana was certain he was cheating on her.
You are insane.
He denied it, as most accused people do.
I just love you. I'm sorry.
I can't take it anymore.
Dana is determined to check Chris's cell phone for evidence of cheating.
Most women just wait till the husband goes in the shower and does that.
The hell is that?
It'll calm you down.
But Dana gives him one of her home-brewed potions.
Dana developed a pattern of drugging people to get what she wanted from them. She drugged Chris to a point where he was unconscious, allowing her to get his fingerprint and therefore get into his phone.
Dana confirms Chris is cheating, but it comes at a cost.
Chris found out what she had done and how she had violated his privacy. He was furious. So on Thanksgiving, he just moved out. That was the end for him.
Dana can't cope
I can't talk to you.
with husband number 4
Sorry, Bill.
walking out the door.
Things in her life really start to fall apart.
Federal Heights, Colorado, 2017. Dana Jennings hits rock bottom. Her life's a disaster, and she blames everyone but herself.
Come on, hon. Lying around like this won't help.
Her father, Bill, tries tough love.
Look, I love you, but it's time to get your life together.
Dana sees encouragement as cruelty.
It's all your fault Chris left.
Dana built up more and more resentment against her father.
She wanted to have her husband back, and she wanted to have a lovely home.
Dana decides there's only one option.
She could do all of those things if her father just wasn't around.
Get rid of Dad, have a happy life with Chris in Dad's house.
Dana looks for a potion stronger than her home remedies. An animal tranquilizer that can kill. On December 9th, 2017, she serves up her lethal cocktail.
There you go.
Oh, that's wonderful, darling. Thank you.
It's a suppressant to the respiratory system, so ultimately it will slow all your body functions down.
Dana, Something's wrong.
You're probably just tired.
From what I understand, it was pretty high levels. I've heard that, maybe enough to tranquilize 26 horses.
He would never have thought in a million years that his daughter was trying to get rid of him.
Dana murdered her father, the one man who was always there for her. It was an act of ultimate betrayal.
Bill's gone. But Dana has a new problem.
A dead body. She remembered that trench that her dad had dug around the furnace, not knowing that he actually was digging his own grave.
She buys concrete to seal the grave. To ensure she has enough to cover the surface, she backfills the hole with trash.
And to throw trash on him, and bury him in his own basement, that's pretty cold-hearted.
You're dead to me. My past with you is dead to me.
For a month, Dana is free to live the life she chooses.
That he was with his girlfriend. She was telling other people that he was in the mountains.
It's not the only red flag.
Bill was just not that kind of guy to cut off from everybody all at once.
Hello?
Hello, ma'am. We've been asked to do a welfare check on Bill Musak.
Oh, he's away.
You mind if we take a look around?
Of course. Come in.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dana had an overabundance of self-respect. She saw herself as quite the intellectual.
She anticipates every question.
Quite a stench in here.
Yeah, the toilet overflowed. I'm burning some oils.
She was boiling peppermint oil to cover the smell.
But she's in trouble from the moment investigators catch a whiff of an unmistakable odor. Decomposing human flesh.
Once you smell that smell and once you've been exposed to that, it's something that you really can't mistake it for anything else.
A second search of the house.
And all of a sudden my phone's just vibrating off my lap.
They pulled up the cement and found the body of Bill, a man who died only because he wanted to be a good father.
I think you know he's dead. We found his body in the basement.
And the crocodile tears started at that point. And I truly believe that there was no emotion there. That was what she thought we wanted to see from her.
She fools no one. In 2019, Dana Jennings is convicted of first-degree murder and tampering with a body. She is sentenced to life in prison. No parole.
Dana has blamed everything that went wrong in her life on someone else.
Dana never takes responsibility for her own mistakes, not even the biggest one. Killing the only person in the world who really cared.
I would love to sit down with Dana one day and say, why? Why did you decide to kill your dad?
I don't think there is any explaining Dana. She's just bad to the bone.
These deadly women untied an eternal bond to commit an unthinkable act. Heather Barbera's rage dragged her into.
The phone rings at 2:17 a.m., cutting through the quiet of a California coastal town that has spent nearly 3 decades trying to forget what happened here. And in that moment, before a single word is spoken, history shifts. Because this call is not about something new, it is about something buried. something sealed in evidence lockers and memory boxes, something everyone thought would never speak again, and yet tonight, it does. In 1994, California felt different. The nights were darker, the roads emptier, and fear traveled without needing a name. This was a time before constant surveillance, before smartphones, before DNA databases could whisper the truth from a drop of blood no larger than a tear. It was a time when crimes could disappear into the cracks of paperwork and human error, when a killer could walk away simply by waiting long enough. And on one cold autumn evening, someone did exactly that. The house sat at the end of a quiet street, modest, forgettable, the kind of place neighbors glance at without really seeing. Inside lived a woman whose life followed no headlines, no notoriety, no warning signs. She worked regular hours, spoke to her family every Sunday, and planned a future that never came. The night she was killed, there were no screams reported, no frantic calls, no witnesses stepping forward. Just silence. And then morning. When police arrived, the scene was wrong in ways that only seasoned investigators recognize. Furniture untouched, no signs of forced entry, no chaotic struggle. But the body told a different story. Violence without noise. Control without mercy. Whoever did this had time. And whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The headlines came fast and sharp. Local woman found dead in her home. Community shocked. Police seek answers. The word cold case had not yet arrived, but it was already forming, invisible, inevitable. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking the same questions, receiving the same confused shakes of the head. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. No one knew her well enough to imagine who would want her dead. They processed the scene by the standards of the time. Fibers. Fingerprints. A small biological trace recovered from the victim's body, carefully sealed, labeled, logged. Back then, it was hope without a name. DNA testing existed, but its reach was limited, its speed painfully slow, its databases small and fragmented. The evidence went into storage, not forgotten, but waiting. Suspects surfaced and vanished. A former acquaintance questioned, released. A neighbor scrutinized, cleared. A coworker whose alibi held just enough to survive. Each lead collapsed under scrutiny, leaving investigators staring at a wall built from uncertainty and exhaustion. Weeks turned into months. Months into years. The press moved on. The town learned how to live with an absence that never quite faded. The victim's family did not move on. They couldn't. Birthdays passed with empty chairs. Holidays arrived with unanswered questions. Every knock at the door carried the same impossible hope. Every call after midnight brought fear. They were told the same thing, again and again, the case is still open. We haven't forgotten. But time is a cruel negotiator. It dulls urgency. It drains resources. It turns certainty into dust. By the early 2000s, the file had grown thick but lifeless. A cold case in everything but name. New detectives read it like a crime novel with the final chapter torn out. They saw the missed chances, the technology that hadn't existed yet, the questions that could no longer be answered because witnesses had moved, memories had faded, some had died. The killer, somewhere out there, had aged. Maybe grown careless. Maybe grown confident. Years passed. The evidence slept. Until science caught up. In a quiet lab, decades later, a technician opened an envelope sealed in another era. The biological sample still intact, still viable, still holding the voice of someone who thought they had escaped time itself. Advanced DNA testing extracted a profile clearer than anything investigators in 1994 could have imagined. It was entered into a database that now spans states, crimes, generations. And then, the waiting began again. No one expected a hit. Cold cases rarely announced themselves with drama. They usually end with a memo, a note, a polite update to a grieving family that the trail has gone cold once more. But this time was different. This time, the system responded. A match. Partial at first. Then stronger. Then undeniable. The name that appeared was not on the original suspect list. Not a neighbor. Not a coworker. Not anyone investigators had seriously considered. It was someone who had lived quietly in the margins, someone who had passed through the town without leaving fingerprints anyone thought to collect. Someone who had gone on with life while a family remained frozen in 1994. Detectives reopened the case with a sense of disbelief that bordered on reverence. Files were pulled. Timelines reconstructed. Old interviews replayed. Every movement of the suspect, back then and now, was examined under a microscope sharpened by hindsight. And suddenly, details that once seemed insignificant began to scream. A missed connection. A forgotten encounter. A moment that, at the time, meant nothing. The suspect was located. Older now. Slower. Carrying decades of ordinary life layered over an extraordinary secret. When investigators knocked on the door, they were not met with panic. They were met with calm. The kind of calm that comes from believing you have already won. Inside the interrogation room, the past finally caught up. Questions were asked that had waited 30 years to be spoken aloud. The suspect denied everything. Claimed coincidence. Claimed misfortune. But science does not negotiate. The DNA did not blink. It did not forget. It told the same story every time it was asked. For the investigators who had started their careers long after 1994, this was more than an arrest. It was a message. Cold cases are not dead. They are patient. They wait for technology, for persistence, for the moment when the truth becomes louder than time. When the news broke, the community felt the shock ripple outward. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Old fears resurfaced. People remembered where they were when the crime happened, how close it had been, how safe they thought they were. The headlines spread fast, sharp, impossible to ignore. California 1994 cold case solved, DNA match stuns investigators. For the victim's family, the word solved did not bring peace. It brought weight. Relief tangled with grief. Answers arrived too late to change anything that mattered most. Justice, delayed by decades, still carried a cost no verdict could repay. And as the suspect was led away, cameras flashing, the town realized something unsettling. The killer had lived among them, invisible, protected by time and chance. And if not for a single preserved sample, a single technological leap, the truth would have remained buried forever. The case was no longer cold. But its shadow remained. And in the silence that followed the arrest, one question lingered, heavier than all the others. How many more stories like this are still waiting, sealed in envelopes, listening for the moment when science finally calls their names? The arrest does not bring quiet. It brings noise. Sirens in memory, not on the street, a low hum of disbelief that settles over the town like coastal fog, because when a cold case cracks open after 30 years, it doesn't just reveal a killer. It exposes every moment when the truth could have surfaced but didn't, every ordinary day the suspect woke up free while the victim remained frozen in time. Detectives move fast now, driven by momentum they have waited decades to feel. The suspect's past is pulled apart piece by piece, like a house stripped down to its studs. Where were you in 1994? Who did you know? Why were you here? Old addresses resurface, long-forgotten jobs, brief relationships that ended without explanation. Patterns begin to emerge, not dramatic at first, but persistent, the kind that only becomes visible when years are compressed into hours of review. Back then, the suspect was a stranger drifting through California, temporary housing, unstable work, no roots deep enough to notice when he vanished. He had been questioned once, barely, dismissed quickly, a name scribbled in the margins of a notebook that would later gather dust. In 1994, there was no reason to look harder. Now, every reason screams to be heard. Investigators re-walk the crime scene, even though the house no longer exists as it once did. Renovated. Repainted. Sold. But the floor plan remains, and with it, the physics of violence. They map movements, angles, distances, imagining the silence, the control, the confidence required. This was not random. This was not panic. This was intent. The DNA evidence becomes the spine of the case, but not its soul. Science opens the door, but motive must walk through it. Prosecutors need more than a match. They need context, opportunity, a narrative strong enough to survive a courtroom where time itself will be put on trial. Defense attorneys will say memories lie. Evidence degrades. Investigations make mistakes. And they won't be wrong. Witnesses are tracked down, some reluctantly, some with a strange relief that they are finally being asked again. Voices older now, slower, but certain details remain sharp, like shards that never dulled. A man seen near the house. A car parked where it didn't belong. A brief interaction that felt off but not alarming enough to report. Back then, it was nothing. Now, it's everything. The victim's routines are reconstructed hour by hour. Her last phone call. Her final errand. The ordinary choices that placed her in the path of someone who had already decided her fate. There is no evidence she knew him well. No history of conflict. That absence terrifies investigators more than a clear motive ever could. It suggests opportunity over obsession. Availability over planning. A predator who waited for the right moment, not the right person. As the case file thickens again, this time with purpose, the media circles back. Old footage is pulled. Grainy photographs resurface on evening news segments. The victim's face, younger than anyone remembers, fills screens once more. For the community, it feels like being forced to relive a nightmare they had learned to keep at arm's length. The suspect's family speaks next, stunned, fractured, caught between loyalty and horror. They insist they never knew. And maybe they didn't. People rarely advertise the worst thing they've ever done. Evil, most of the time, looks like routine. Shared meals. Normal conversations. The slow passage of years. In interrogation transcripts, the suspect's words grow thinner. He sticks to denial, but the cracks are there, subtle shifts in language, moments where he knows too much, where he corrects investigators on details they never shared. Detectives notice everything now. They've learned patience from the case itself. Silence becomes a tool. Time, once the enemy, now works in their favor. Prosecutors begin shaping the story they will tell, aware that jurors will have to bridge decades in their minds. They emphasize the science, the chain of custody, the preservation of evidence against all odds. They frame the delay not as failure, but as inevitability, a crime committed in an era not yet ready to confront it. But outside the courthouse, a different conversation unfolds. People ask how someone could live free for so long. How many chances there were to stop him. Whether justice delayed can ever truly be justice at all. The term cold case takes on new meaning, no longer just a label, but a warning. The victim's family sits quietly through updates, absorbing details they never asked to know. The way she died. The way he moved. The way it all ended in a room that should have been safe. Closure is a word people use casually, but nothing about this feels closed. It feels reopened. Raw. Unstable. As trial preparations intensify, investigators uncover something unsettling. A similar incident. Years later. Another woman. Another quiet space. Another moment where the suspect was nearby, present, unremarkable. The case never went anywhere. Different jurisdiction. Different outcome. No DNA preserved that time. Just suspicion and then nothing. The implication hangs heavy in the room. This may not have been the only one. Cold cases rarely exist alone. They cluster, connected by gaps in systems, by the blind spots of their era. Detectives exchange looks they don't put into reports. Some questions have answers no one is ready to hear. The suspect is formally charged. The courtroom fills. The words "not guilty" echo, expected, procedural, almost hollow against the weight of the evidence waiting to speak. Outside, cameras flash again, documenting a moment that feels both overdue and incomplete. For the investigators who inherited this case, the pressure is immense. Lose this, and the message changes. Win it, and every unsolved file in storage suddenly feels closer to the surface. This is no longer just about 1994. It's about whether time truly protects those who commit violence in silence. As the trial date approaches, the town braces itself. Old wounds reopen. Conversations grow hushed. Parents look at their children differently. Locks are checked twice. Not because the killer is still free, but because he once was, and that knowledge cannot be undone. The cold case has been solved on paper. But in the minds of those who lived through it, it is still unfolding, still breathing, still demanding attention. And as the courtroom doors prepare to open, one truth becomes unavoidable. This story is no longer just about a crime. It's about endurance. The endurance of evidence. The endurance of grief. And the endurance of a truth that refused to stay buried. The courtroom smells like polished wood and old paper, a place designed to slow time, and yet everything here feels accelerated, compressed, 30 years of silence funneling into a single room where every word now carries the weight of history. When the jury files in, they are not just taking seats, they are stepping into 1994, into a world without hindsight, without the comfort of answers, and they are being asked to decide whether science can truly reach back across decades and speak with certainty. The prosecution opens carefully, aware that this is not a typical case. They do not begin with the arrest. They begin with the night. The quiet street. The ordinary house. The woman who should have lived a long life. They describe the scene as it was found, not sensational, not exaggerated, but precise, deliberate, every detail chosen to build a picture of control rather than chaos. This was not a crime of impulse, they argue. This was a crime of opportunity taken by someone who believed he would never be caught. The defense listens without interruption, already preparing to dismantle the timeline piece by piece. They will not deny the tragedy. They will question the path that leads from tragedy to this defendant, sitting calmly at the table, older, grayer, almost anonymous. They know their strongest weapon is time. 30 years is a long time for doubt to grow. When the DNA expert takes the stand, the room leans forward. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for, the hinge on which the entire case swings. The expert explains the science slowly, deliberately, translating complexity into clarity. How a sample collected in 1994 was preserved. How modern techniques extracted a full genetic profile. How that profile was compared against a database that did not exist when the crime was committed. And finally, how the match was confirmed again and again, eliminating coincidence, eliminating error. The defense pushes back hard. Questions come sharp and relentless. Could contamination have occurred? Were standards different back then? Can we really trust evidence that old? The expert does not flinch. Protocols are cited. Documentation produced. Chain of custody traced like a lifeline through decades of storage and transfers. The science holds. But science alone does not tell a story. So the prosecution builds one around it. They bring in witnesses whose memories have survived the erosion of time. A neighbor who remembers the unfamiliar car. A former coworker who recalls the defendant asking questions that seemed harmless then, invasive now. Each testimony is small on its own. Together, they begin to close a circle that was left open for too long. The defendant watches, expression carefully neutral. When his own statements are introduced, the room tightens. Interviews from the 1990s. Recent interrogations. The subtle differences between them. The moments where he knew details he shouldn't have known. The prosecution doesn't accuse outright. They let the words speak for themselves. Silence does the rest. Outside the courtroom, the town debates. Some believe the evidence is overwhelming. Others are uneasy. They worry about precedent. About what it means when someone is judged for actions committed in a world that no longer exists. The phrase cold case is repeated endlessly, stripped of its technical meaning and filled with emotion. For some, it represents hope. For others, fear. The victim's family sits through it all, absorbing testimony like blows. They hear details that were once withheld for their own protection. Now, protection is no longer the priority. Truth is. And truth, even when it arrives wrapped in justice, is still sharp. As days pass, the prosecution introduces a final, unsettling thread. The possibility of pattern. They are careful not to overreach, careful not to accuse the defendant of crimes that were never charged. But they hint at similarities. Locations. Behaviors. Timing. The suggestion is enough. Jurors exchange glances. The idea takes root. The defense objects. Motions are filed. Arguments are made behind closed doors. What can be said? What must remain unsaid? The judge weighs fairness against relevance, knowing that a single ruling could tilt the balance of a case built over decades. When the defendant finally takes the stand, the air changes. This is no longer about evidence. It's about credibility. He speaks calmly, confidently, presenting himself as a victim of circumstance, a man caught in the machinery of a system eager to correct its past mistakes. He denies knowing the victim. Denies being in the house. Denies everything that matters. Cross-examination is ruthless. The prosecutor circles patiently, tightening the net with each question. Small inconsistencies surface. A date misremembered. A location shifted. Nothing dramatic. Nothing explosive. Just enough to suggest that the story has been rehearsed too many times. As closing arguments approach, exhaustion sets in. Not just physical, but emotional. Everyone in the room understands that this verdict will not just end a trial. It will rewrite a history the town has lived with for 30 years. The prosecution speaks last. They remind the jury that justice does not expire. That technology may evolve, but truth remains constant. That the victim waited decades to be heard, and now, through science and persistence, she finally is. They do not ask for vengeance. They ask for accountability. The defense responds with urgency. They warn against certainty born from hindsight. Against the temptation to let science overshadow reasonable doubt. They remind jurors that once a verdict is delivered, there is no rewind button, no opportunity to correct a mistake born from pressure and emotion. The jury files out. The courtroom empties slowly. Conversations are hushed. No one knows how long deliberations will take. Hours. Days. The waiting begins again, echoing the long years when waiting was all anyone could do. And in that quiet stretch of uncertainty, one thing becomes clear. Whether the verdict is guilty or not guilty, the cold case has already changed everything. It has proven that the past is not fixed. It can be reopened. Re-examined. And when it is, it does not come back gently. Deliberations stretch into the second day, and the courthouse becomes a holding chamber for tension, a place where no one speaks above a whisper because every sound feels intrusive against the weight of what is being decided behind closed doors. Jurors sit with binders spread open, timelines overlapping, faces from 1994 staring back at them from faded photographs, and again they return to the same question: can the truth survive 30 years without changing shape? Inside the jury room, the DNA evidence dominates the conversation. Charts are reviewed. Expert testimony replayed in memory. Some jurors trusted instinctively, the clean logic of genetic certainty cutting through the fog of doubt. Others hesitate, haunted by the defense's warnings, by the idea that science, powerful as it is still wielded by human hands capable of error. The debate is not loud, but it is relentless. Outside, the victim's family waits, trapped in a familiar purgatory. They have waited before. They know how to do this. But this waiting is different. This time, an answer exists somewhere, fully formed, just out of reach. Every minute feels like a countdown to either validation or collapse. When the jury finally returns, the room stiffens. People rise. Breath is held. The verdict is read, clear and firm, cutting through decades of uncertainty in a single sentence. Guilty. The word lands heavy, not with celebration, but with finality. The cold case, once defined by absence, now has a conclusion that cannot be undone. The defendant does not react. No outburst. No collapse. Just a slight tightening of the jaw, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face before it disappears. He is led away quietly, the way he lived for years after the crime, unnoticed, unremarkable, invisible. For the family, emotion arrives in waves. Relief collides with grief. Justice arrives too late to feel triumphant, too real to feel abstract. The courtroom empties, but the impact does not. It follows everyone out into the daylight, into a town that must now learn how to live with an answer instead of a question. Sentencing is scheduled. Statements are prepared. The legal system moves forward, methodical, procedural, indifferent to the fact that lives were altered long before it caught up. Prosecutors speak of accountability. Defense attorneys speak of mercy. The judge listens, aware that no sentence can restore what was taken in 1994. When the sentence is handed down, it is severe. Decades in prison. A lifetime measured in walls and routines. The defendant will grow old where time moves slowly, the way it once moved for a family waiting for justice. The symmetry is not lost on anyone in the room. The headlines return, louder this time. Cold case closed. Justice after 30 years. DNA delivers verdict. But behind the bold text, nuance is lost. Closure is not a switch that flips. It is a process, uneven, unpredictable, sometimes unreachable. Detectives return to their offices, to desks stacked with files that suddenly feel closer to the surface. The success of this case sends a ripple through departments across the state. Evidence lockers are reopened. Old samples re-examined. The message is clear, time is no longer a shield. But with momentum comes discomfort. Questions resurface about the early investigation. About missed opportunities. About whether this could have ended sooner. Retired officers are contacted. Decisions from another era are scrutinized under modern light. Some welcome the review. Others bristle. History does not enjoy being judged by the future. The victim's house, long since changed, becomes a point of quiet pilgrimage. People drive past without stopping, imagining the night that once unfolded inside, the silence, the final moments. They imagine how close they were without knowing it. That awareness lingers, altering the geography of memory. As weeks pass, the case continues to echo. In training rooms. In conferences. In conversations between investigators who now believe more firmly than ever in preservation, in patience, in the value of what might seem insignificant today. A single sample. A single report. A single decision to keep something rather than discard it. For the family, life resumes in a new shape. The future is still missing someone. That will never change. But the past has been reclaimed, pulled out of uncertainty and given a name, a face, a sentence. The weight they carried alone for decades is finally acknowledged by the world. Yet even as this case settles into history, an unease remains. Because solving one cold case does not erase the others. It highlights them. It forces attention toward the silent shelves of evidence still waiting, still patient, still unresolved. And in that awareness lies the final truth of this story. Justice did arrive, but not cleanly, not quickly, not without scars. It arrived the only way it could, carried forward by science, persistence, and the refusal to let a voice from 1994 remain unheard. The case is closed. The impact is not. After the verdict, the town does not exhale. It holds its breath. Because resolution, it turns out, is not an ending, it is a rupture, a tearing open of memories that had been sealed for survival. People replay the trial in their minds, not as spectators, but as participants who now realize how close the violence once was, how easily it blended into routine, how silently it passed through their streets and left a permanent scar. In police departments across California, the case becomes a reference point, a quiet benchmark spoken about in hallways and briefing rooms. Detectives ask each other what they preserved, what they might have overlooked, what evidence is still waiting in boxes labeled with years no one wants to revisit. The solved cold case does not bring comfort. It brings urgency. Evidence technicians begin opening lockers that have not been touched in decades. Envelopes yellowed with age. Labels written in handwriting that belongs to retired officers, some deceased, some still alive and now suddenly relevant again. Each item is handled with a reverence shaped by this case, by the knowledge that one preserved sample changed everything. The suspect's name becomes searchable, permanent, attached forever to the crime he believed time would erase. His past is dissected publicly now, not just by investigators, but by journalists, podcasters, and amateur researchers hungry for meaning. Patterns are proposed. Theories spread. Some accurate. Some reckless. The truth competes with speculation in a digital space that did not exist when the murder occurred. The victim's family watches this unfold with mixed emotions. They asked for justice, not for spectacle. They wanted answers, not commentary. But once a cold case is solved, it no longer belongs only to those most affected. It becomes a story others tell, reshape, monetize. Control slips away again, this time in a different direction. Prosecutors give interviews emphasizing restraint. They remind the public that one conviction does not equal omniscience. That not every question has an answer. That justice systems operate on proof, not suspicion. Their caution is deliberate, an attempt to keep the line between certainty and curiosity from dissolving entirely. Behind closed doors, however, investigators continue asking questions that will never make headlines. They review the suspect's movements after 1994, tracing them against unsolved cases, not to accuse, but to understand. They are careful. They know how easily assumption can masquerade as truth. But the exercise itself reveals a disturbing possibility. Silence is rarely isolated. In the town, daily life resumes with a subtle shift. People lock doors a little earlier. They talk about the case in past tense, but with present emotion. Parents explain it to teenagers who weren't born yet when it happened, struggling to convey a danger that existed without warning signs, without viral alerts, without anything to signal that a quiet night could turn fatal. The house where the crime occurred changes hands again. The new owners know the history. Everyone does now. They renovate, repaint, try to impose normalcy on a space that has absorbed too much. And yet, there are nights when the silence feels heavier there, when absence has a texture you can almost touch. For the detectives who closed the case, there is no victory lap. Just a return to work, to other files that now seem louder, more insistent. The solved case does not fade into the background. It follows them, a reminder that time does not forgive negligence, only persistence. One investigator revisits the original reports late at night, reading them not for leads, but for understanding. He sees the limits of the era clearly now. The lack of databases. The reliance on intuition. The assumptions that guided decisions no one questioned then. It's not blame he feels, but responsibility. To do better with what exists now. The victim's name is spoken more often, with respect, with intention. She is no longer just a case number, no longer a photograph from the 1990s. She is a person whose life mattered enough to outlast time's attempt to erase it. That recognition spreads quietly, changing how the story is told. As months pass, the intensity dims, but the impact deepens. The solved cold case becomes a teaching tool, a warning, a symbol. It proves that patience can be more powerful than immediacy, that evidence outlives excuses, that the past is not passive. It waits. And somewhere, in a prison where routines replace freedom, the man who believed he had outrun history confronts a reality he never planned for. That time, which once protected him, ultimately betrayed him. That silence, which once concealed him, finally spoke. The story continues, not as a mystery anymore, but as a lesson written in permanence. A reminder that even the coldest cases are not frozen forever. They are merely waiting for the moment when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Time settles into a strange rhythm after conviction, slower on the surface, faster underneath, because while the public attention drifts, the consequences of the solved cold case continue to unfold quietly, relentlessly, reshaping systems that once believed the past was untouchable. In offices lit by fluorescent bulbs, detectives sit with coffee gone cold, staring at shelves of unsolved files that no longer feel dormant. They feel impatient. The case becomes a catalyst. Grants are approved. Cold case units expand. Old evidence once dismissed as marginal is reevaluated with fresh eyes and modern tools. The question is no longer whether it's worth trying, but whether anyone can afford not to. Because now there is proof. Proof that a single preserved sample can outlive excuses, budgets, and careers. In training academies, instructors reference the case without embellishment. They talk about chain of custody like it's a sacred ritual. About documentation that seems tedious until it isn't. About the unknown future investigator who may depend on decisions made today. The lesson lands harder than theory ever could. This is not abstract. This is real. This is what happens when patience meets progress. The victim's family enters a new phase of grief, one they didn't anticipate. With answers come memories they had long suppressed. Sounds. Smells. The feeling of a phone call changing everything. Therapy helps. So does distance. But the mind resists closure. It circles, returning to what-ifs that no verdict can silence. Anniversaries arrive with less dread but more complexity. The date of the crime no longer represents only loss. It now carries the weight of endurance. 30 years is a long time to wait for the truth, longer still to live with it once it arrives. Meanwhile, journalists request follow-ups. Documentarians ask for interviews. The story has layers now. Science, persistence, redemption through technology. But the family declines most offers. They have already shared enough. Their healing does not require an audience. Inside prison walls, the man at the center of the story adjusts to a reality he never rehearsed. There is no audience here. No narrative to control. Just time, structured and unyielding, moving the way it once moved for the people he left behind. Other inmates know his crime. Cold cases carry a certain reputation. Not impulsive. Not chaotic. Calculated. That knowledge isolates him further. Appeals are filed, as expected. Arguments lean heavily on age of evidence, on procedural nuance, on the discomfort of judging the past with modern tools. The courts listen, methodically, but the foundation holds. The DNA does not age. The documentation does not waver. The verdict remains intact. Across the state, families of other victims pay attention. They call departments. They ask questions they were once discouraged from asking. Do you still have the evidence? Has it been tested? Could this be reopened? Some receive hopeful answers. Others hear silence. The contrast is stark, and it matters. Cold case support groups grow more active, more visible. Stories are shared not for pity, but for pressure. Pressure to preserve. To test. To remember that justice delayed is still justice demanded. The town itself changes subtly. New residents learn the story as part of local lore, passed along cautiously, without drama. It becomes a reference point, a reminder that safety is never guaranteed, that trust should not replace awareness. The streets look the same. The memory does not. For the detectives who solved the case, recognition is brief and uncomfortable. They didn't create the evidence. They didn't change the past. They simply refused to let it stay buried. That distinction matters to them. It keeps arrogance at bay. Late one night, a senior investigator stands alone in the evidence room, lights dim, shelves stretching into shadow. He runs his hand along a row of boxes marked with years older than his career. Each one contains a story paused mid-sentence. He knows now that pause is not permanent. The solved cold case has altered the balance. Silence no longer feels safe. Time no longer feels protective. Somewhere in those boxes, other truths are waiting, patient and intact, listening for the moment when someone decides they are worth hearing. The ripple effect spreads farther than anyone expected, moving beyond courtrooms and evidence rooms into the quiet spaces where memory and fear coexist, because a solved cold case does not simply correct the past, it reframes it. People begin to look backward differently, reinterpreting moments they once dismissed, wondering how many signs they missed, how many ordinary interactions were never ordinary at all. In neighboring towns, detectives quietly compare notes. They pull files from the same era, crimes with similar silences, similar absences of witnesses, similar conclusions stamped insufficient evidence. The California 1994 case becomes a ghost at the table, uninvited but impossible to ignore. It whispers the same question over and over, what if this one isn't really over either? Technology keeps advancing, indifferent to the emotional weight it carries. New forensic tools promise deeper analysis, clearer results, fewer ambiguities. Algorithms can now see patterns humans never could, linking behaviors across time and geography. This progress is celebrated publicly, but privately it unsettles investigators. Because every advancement brings a reckoning with what could have been known sooner. The victim's family feels that unease too. They watch as other cases gain momentum, as names they recognize from old news clippings resurface. Hope becomes complicated. It no longer feels like a fragile wish, but like a responsibility they carry for others still waiting. They attend a vigil once, quietly, standing among strangers bound together by absence. No speeches are made. None are needed. The convicted man fades from headlines, but not from thought. His appeal wins through the system, slow and predictable. Each filing reopens wounds, forcing the family to brace for the possibility, however small, that certainty could be challenged. The law allows for this. Fairness demands it. Emotion does not. In prison, time becomes repetitive, days distinguished only by minor disruptions. The man reflects, not publicly, not with confession or remorse, but in the isolation that follows when a lifetime of secrecy collapses. He is no longer anonymous. His name carries weight now, attached to a story that will outlive him. Back in the town where it all began, the crime scene exists only in memory. The physical space has been overwritten by renovations and routines, but memory resists renovation. Longtime residents avoid the street unconsciously, taking longer routes without realizing why. Trauma reshapes geography in subtle ways. Schools invite speakers to talk about forensic science, about careers in criminal justice, about the importance of patience and detail. Students listen with a fascination that borders on disbelief. To them, 1994 feels ancient. They struggle to imagine a world where answers were not instantly searchable, where waiting was the default state. For investigators nearing retirement, the case triggers reflection. Some revisit moments from their early careers, wondering if they handled things differently, if they preserved enough, if they asked the right questions. There is no comfort in these thoughts, but there is clarity. The work was never just about closing cases. It was about leaving something intact for the future. Media narratives soften with time, shifting from shock to analysis. Articles focus less on the crime itself and more on the process that finally exposed it. The phrase cold case loses some of its finality. It begins to sound less like an ending and more like a challenge. The victim's name is added to a memorial, engraved carefully, deliberately. It is not an apology. It is acknowledgement. That her life mattered enough to be remembered not just for how it ended, but for how long it took to honor that ending with truth. As years continue forward, the solved case settles into the background of institutional memory, referenced but not relived. Yet its influence remains active, shaping decisions, altering priorities, reminding those who encounter it that time does not erase responsibility. It only delays the moment when it must be faced. And somewhere, in the quiet between new cases and old files, the lesson lingers, steady and unavoidable. The past is never as distant as it appears. It is only waiting for the right conditions to speak again. Years continue to move forward, but the solved cold case refuses to fade into archival obscurity, because its presence is no longer defined by what was hidden, but by what it revealed about the nature of time, memory, and accountability. Investigators speak of it less often now, yet when they do, their voice is lower, not out of fear, but respect, as if the case itself is listening. Across California, cold case task forces quietly exchange information, comparing preservation techniques, revisiting evidence storage protocols, sharing lessons learned the hard way. The 1994 case becomes a silent benchmark, invoked whenever someone questions whether the effort is worth it. No one answers directly. They don't need to. The outcome already did. The victim's family finds themselves in an unexpected role, not advocates by choice, but by gravity. Other families reach out, seeking guidance, reassurance, a sense that waiting does not always end in silence. Conversations are careful, restrained. No promises are made. Only the truth is shared. That patience hurts. That hope survives anyway. The courtroom where the verdict was delivered hosts new trials, new juries, new stories. But for those who were there, the room never quite resets. Certain seats carry memory. Certain phrases echo longer than others. Justice is cumulative like that. It leaves residue. In prison, the man convicted of the crime experiences the slow erosion of control. Appeals narrow. Options disappear. The future collapses into routine. The world moves on without him, carrying his name only as context, not as identity. He is no longer central to the story. He is evidence of its conclusion. Technology advances again. Genetic genealogy expands. Databases grow. The tools that solved the 1994 case are already becoming outdated, replaced by methods even more precise. Investigators understand what this means. Somewhere, more answers are forming, latent, waiting for access, waiting for permission. The town commemorates the victim quietly on the anniversary of the verdict rather than the crime. It is a subtle but significant shift. The focus moves from loss to endurance, from fear to acknowledgement. The night itself no longer owns the narrative. Survival does. For those who lived through the years of uncertainty, the solved cold case becomes a personal marker of time. They remember who they were when it happened, who they became while waiting, and who they are now that the waiting has ended. Few experiences stretch identity like unresolved trauma finally addressed. Young investigators entering the field hear the story early in their training. It shapes expectations, tempers ambition, instills caution. They learn that heroism in this work is rarely loud. It looks like filing correctly. Storing carefully. Refusing to discard what cannot yet be understood. Media interest fades, as it always does, but the story remains searchable, permanent, immune to forgetting. Anyone who looks will find it. Anyone who reads will understand that the gap between crime and consequence is not always permanent. The victim's family visits the grave with less anger now, though sadness remains. They speak aloud without expecting answers. They talk about ordinary things. Weather. Time. The future. The silence there feels different than it once did. It no longer screams. It listens. The solved cold case stands as proof of something uncomfortable and powerful. That justice does not always arrive when it is needed most. That waiting can be its own form of endurance. And that when the truth finally surfaces, it does not erase pain, but it does change its shape. The story has reached a point of quiet stability. Not peace. Stability. A state where the past has been named and placed where it belongs, no longer roaming free, no longer unanswered. Yet even in this quiet, there is a current of anticipation. Because every solved cold case reminds the world of the unsolved ones. And every answer forces a new question into the light. The passage of time does not soften the story, it refines it, stripping away the noise until only the essential truths remain. And among those truths is this: a solved cold case does not end when the cell door closes. It continues in the lives shaped by it, in the systems altered because of it, and in the quiet vigilance that replaces complacency. The 1994 case becomes embedded in policy discussions, cited during budget hearings and legislative sessions where decisions about funding forensic science are made. It is no longer just a story of crime and punishment. It is evidence. Proof that investment in preservation and analysis carries consequences measured not in statistics, but in human resolution. Forensic labs evolve in response. Storage conditions improve. Redundancies are added. Digital backups mirror physical records. The fear of losing something irreplaceable becomes institutional, a shared anxiety informed by the knowledge that once lost, some truths never return. The victim's family feels the distance from the case growing, and with it, a strange relief. Their lives are no longer organized around court dates and appeals. Grief becomes quieter, more private, no longer interrupted by sudden updates or legal notifications. They begin to plan without looking over their shoulders. Yet memory does not disappear. It settles. Certain songs. Certain seasons. Certain news headlines still trigger the same tightening in the chest. Healing is not linear. It curves, loops back, pauses. But now, it does so without the constant question of who or why. That uncertainty no longer shadows every thought. In law schools, the case is discussed in seminars about evidence and ethics. Students debate the implications of delayed justice, the balance between certainty and fairness, the role of emerging technology in revisiting the past. The story lives on in theory as well as reality, shaping minds that will one day argue similar cases. The man convicted of the crime grows older in confinement. His world contracts. News of advancements in DNA technology reaches him occasionally, a reminder of the forces that unraveled his anonymity. He becomes a cautionary tale within the system, an example cited without sympathy. The town continues to change. New businesses open. Old ones close. Generations shift. Children grow up unaware of the fear that once hovered there. And yet, the story remains accessible, waiting online, preserved like the evidence that solved it. Anyone can find it. Anyone can learn. Detectives who worked the case retire, carrying with them a sense of completion rare in their profession. They understand how unusual it is to see a story from beginning to end, even if that end arrives decades late. It alters how they remember their careers. It gives weight to the long hours spent waiting for answers that rarely come. Cold case units elsewhere follow the ripple, reopening files that were once considered hopeless. Some will fail. Some will succeed. All will benefit from the shift in mindset. The belief that time alone can bury truth has been permanently challenged. The victim's name appears less often in news cycles now, but it is spoken deliberately when it is spoken at all. It carries context. It carries history. It carries the knowledge that she was not forgotten, even when the world seemed to move on. As the years accumulate, the story transforms from breaking news into institutional memory. It becomes something people reference rather than relive. And yet, its presence remains active, shaping decisions in ways most will never notice. The solved cold case stands as a quiet warning. That anonymity is fragile. That patience can be weaponized by either side. And that silence, no matter how long it lasts, is never permanent. Because somewhere, in an evidence room or a database or a memory not yet questioned, the next answer is already waiting. With distance comes perspective, and perspective reshapes the meaning of what once felt singular, because the solved cold case no longer belongs only to California or to 1994, it belongs to a broader reckoning with how societies remember, how they forget, and how easily they mistake silence for resolution. The case settles into the collective consciousness as a reference point, invoked whenever doubt creeps in about the value of persistence. Investigators who never touched the original file now speak its language fluently. They understand the cadence of delay, the patience required to revisit old ground without expectation. The case has taught them restraint. Not every box hides an answer. Not every answer arrives quickly. But absence of immediacy is not absence of truth. For the victim's family, the world finally feels wider again. Travel plans are made without anxiety about missing a phone call. Celebrations are no longer postponed by court calendars. Life expands cautiously, as if testing whether joy is still permitted after so much waiting. It is. But it arrives differently now, quieter, earned. The community continues to adapt. The story is told to newcomers not as gossip, but as context. A reminder of where the town has been and what it has learned. Fear no longer defines the narrative. Awareness does. In professional circles, the case influences hiring, training, and priorities. Younger investigators are chosen not only for ambition, but for patience. For their willingness to preserve rather than discard. For their comfort with uncertainty. The lesson is clear. Speed closes cases. Patience solves them. The convicted man's appeals reach their final stages. Each denial is brief, procedural, unemotional. The system has spoken. The record is set. His name becomes fixed in legal databases, referenced only as precedent, not as mystery. The anonymity he once relied on is permanently gone. Technology continues its march forward, but now with a sense of humility. Experts caution against overconfidence. Tools evolve, but they require human judgment, ethical boundaries, and restraint. The 1994 case is cited as a success not because technology existed, but because evidence was respected long enough for technology to matter. The victim's legacy becomes subtle but enduring. Scholarships are named quietly. Donations are made anonymously. Acts of remembrance occur without ceremony. Her story becomes less about how she died and more about what her case changed. Late at night, in evidence rooms across the state, lights hum softly over shelves of unopened boxes. Each one represents a paused narrative, a question waiting for conditions to align. The solved cold case has altered how those boxes are seen. They are no longer remnants of failure. They are investments in a future that may yet arrive. The emotional intensity of the story fades for the public, but its structural impact remains. Policies persist. Funding stays allocated. Procedures remain revised. These are the quiet victories no headline captures, but they matter more than momentary shock. For those who lived through the uncertainty, the solved cold case marks a turning point, not an erasure. The past still exists, but it no longer dominates. It has been placed, defined, constrained by truth. That containment changes everything. As the years stretch forward, the story continues to function as both proof and warning. Proof that truth can survive neglect. Warning that it often does so at great cost. And as silence returns to the spaces once filled with questions, it carries a different meaning now. Not concealment. Not ignorance. But the steady, deliberate quiet of something finally understood. In the end, what remains is not the shock of the arrest or the gravity of the sentence, but the echo, the low persistent hum left behind when a question that lived for decades finally receives an answer. The solved cold case settles into history, not as a moment, but as a presence, something that quietly reshapes how the past is allowed to exist alongside the present. The town no longer measures time by before and after the crime. It measures it by endurance. By how long a truth can be ignored before it insists on being heard. People who once whispered about the case now speak of it plainly, without fear of reopening wounds, because the wounds are no longer raw. They are scars, visible, instructive, impossible to deny. In police archives, the file is marked closed, but it is never truly put away. It is referenced, cited, pulled from shelves when doubt creeps in about whether patience is worth the cost. The pages are worn now, not from age, but from use. From being touched by hands searching for guidance rather than answers. The victim's family stands at a distance from the story at last. They have released it into the world, where it no longer demands their constant attention. Grief remains, but it is no longer tethered to uncertainty. The question that haunted every year has been replaced by a fact, and facts, however painful, allow the mind to rest. Justice, in this case, did not arrive cleanly or kindly. It arrived late, heavy, and imperfect. But it arrived nonetheless, carried forward by a decision made long ago to preserve rather than discard, to document rather than assume, to wait rather than forget. That decision mattered more than anyone could have known at the time. The man responsible for the crime fades into the system, another inmate among thousands, his story reduced to context and caution. He is no longer a mystery. He is a conclusion. The anonymity he once relied on has been replaced by permanence. Across the state, across the country, cold cases continue to wait. Some will be solved. Some will not. But none exist in quite the same silence anymore. Each carries the weight of this story, the reminder that time does not absolve, it only delays. The phrase cold case itself changes meaning here. It no longer signals an ending. It signals potential. A pause, not a failure. A story unfinished, not forgotten. As technology evolves and generations pass, this case remains a fixed point, a reminder etched into institutional memory that truth does not weaken with age. It sharpens. It clarifies. It waits. And in the quiet spaces where evidence rests, where unanswered questions linger, where time stretches thin, the legacy of this case endures, steady and unyielding. Because some stories refuse to disappear. They wait. Even after the story claims its ending, it continues to move beneath the surface, like pressure in the earth long after the quake has passed, because a solved cold case does not vanish, it settles, embedding itself into the way institutions think, the way families breathe, the way communities understand the cost of waiting. The narrative no longer demands attention, yet it exerts influence all the same, subtle and persistent. In evidence rooms, policies born from this case harden into habit. Nothing is discarded lightly. Nothing is assumed to be useless. Every envelope is treated as a voice deferred rather than silenced. Technicians handle old samples with a care sharpened by memory, aware that what seems inert today may speak tomorrow with devastating clarity. The victim's name becomes less public and more personal again. It is spoken at family tables, written in birthday cards never sent, carried quietly into future generations who will know her not through headlines, but through stories shaped by love rather than loss. That shift matters. It is the final reclamation of a life once reduced to evidence. Among investigators, the case becomes a shared reference not for triumph, but for restraint. It reminds them that urgency can mislead, that certainty earned too quickly often collapses under time. They learn to respect the long arc, to trust that preservation is sometimes the most decisive action available. The town's relationship with the past stabilizes. The fear that once lingered like static dissipates, replaced by a sober awareness that safety is not guaranteed, but neither is impunity. The streets feel the same. The understanding of them does not. In the legal system, the case is cited sparingly now, its lessons absorbed rather than announced. It has done its work. It no longer needs to persuade. Its existence is argument enough. The man who committed the crime continues to age in confinement, his relevance shrinking as the meaning of the case expands beyond him. He is no longer the axis. The truth is. The systems are. The endurance of evidence is. And somewhere, perhaps in a different state, in a different decade, another family waits with questions that feel unbearable in their uncertainty. They do not know this case personally, but its legacy is already working on their behalf, quietly increasing the chances that patients will one day be rewarded with answers. This is how the story finally resolves, not with silence, but with continuity. A chain unbroken. A standard set. A reminder carried forward without ceremony. The cold case was solved. But what it changed is still unfolding. What endures now is not the chronology of events, but the weight they leave behind, a gravity that bends decisions long after the headlines have faded, because a solved cold case does not retreat into the past, it anchors itself there, reshaping how the future is approached. The story no longer needs retelling to be present. It exists in the pauses, in the caution, in the refusal to assume that time alone can bury truth. In departments that once hesitated to reopen old files, a quiet confidence has taken root. Not optimism, but resolve. The understanding that unanswered questions are not accusations, they are invitations. Invitations to look again, to preserve, to wait without surrendering. The 1994 case becomes less a miracle and more a model, something replicable through discipline rather than luck. The victim's family feels the distance from the case widen further, and with it comes a gentler rhythm to grief. They no longer feel pulled backward by every mention of forensic advances or legal debates. Their lives are not defined by vigilance anymore. Memory remains, but it no longer demands defense. It simply exists, steady and intact. The town continues forward, absorbing the story into its identity without allowing it to dominate. New generations hear it as history, not threat. They learn it alongside other lessons about responsibility and consequence, understanding that safety is maintained not by forgetting the past, but by learning from it. In professional conferences, the case is referenced without embellishment. No dramatic retellings. No lingering on horror. Just facts. Preservation worked. Patience mattered. Evidence endured. Those truths carry more authority than any emotional appeal ever could. Technology advances again, and again the lesson holds. Tools change. Principles do not. Without respect for evidence, innovation is meaningless. The solved cold case stands as proof that restraint can be as powerful as action, that doing nothing prematurely can be the most decisive choice of all. The man responsible becomes increasingly irrelevant to the narrative. His identity dissolves into case law, into footnotes, into context for something larger than himself. The power he once held over the story is gone. Control has shifted permanently to truth. Elsewhere, investigators open a box marked with a year-long past. They do so without expectation, but not without belief. They know now that waiting is not passive. It is active restraint. A form of trust placed in a future that may be better equipped to listen. The phrase cold case no longer feels static here. It feels dynamic, charged with possibility. It implies not an ending, but an interval. A story paused, not erased. As the influence of the case continues to spread quietly, invisibly, it fulfills its final role. Not as a conclusion, but as a standard. A reminder that truth is not fragile. It is patient. And when it finally speaks, it does not need to raise its voice to be heard. Long after the case has stopped making news, its presence continues to surface in unexpected places, in training manuals quietly revised, in evidence rooms reorganized with an almost ritualistic care, in conversations where detectives pause before discarding anything, because this story taught them that absence of value is not the same as invisibility. The solved cold case becomes a reference point not for heroism, but for humility. It reminds those who work in the system that certainty is rare, that assumptions age poorly, and that the most powerful decision is sometimes to leave something untouched, waiting for a future that knows more than the present ever could. Families of other victims follow these developments closely, not with obsession, but with measured attention. They understand now that waiting is not wasted time. It is an investment whose return cannot be predicted, only preserved. In quiet offices, detectives reopen files without urgency, without the pressure of expectation. They have learned from this case that desperation clouds judgment, while patience sharpens it. Every old report is reread not as a failure, but as a snapshot of what was possible at the time. The legacy of the 1994 case begins to feel less like closure and more like infrastructure. Something built quietly beneath the surface that supports future answers without demanding recognition. As the years continue forward, the story migrates fully into institutional memory, where it lives alongside other hard-earned lessons, not as legend, but as precedent. It becomes a silent instructor, guiding decisions without announcing itself, shaping outcomes without spectacle. Young investigators hear about the case not as a dramatic tale, but as a cautionary one. They are taught to respect evidence as if it carries a voice not yet ready to speak. They are reminded that today's limitations do not define tomorrow's reach. The victim's family notices something subtle but profound. The story is no longer chasing them. It has slowed. It has settled. They no longer brace themselves when it is mentioned. It exists now as something complete, no longer demanding energy simply to survive. In the town, the case is referenced less often, but more accurately. Details remain intact. Facts are not exaggerated. Memory becomes precise instead of emotional. That precision feels like healing. The cold case, once defined by uncertainty, now functions as proof that restraint and discipline can outlast fear, noise, and even time itself. There are moments when the story resurfaces unexpectedly, during a new arrest, a reopened investigation, a press conference where an official carefully chooses words, aware that they are standing on ground shaped by past failures and past patience. The solved case has recalibrated expectations. Communities no longer accept unsolved as a permanent state. They understand it as temporary, conditional, dependent on preservation rather than surrender. Evidence rooms feel different now. Not quieter, but heavier. Each box carries potential instead of regret. Each label represents not an ending, but a pause. The convicted man fades almost completely from relevance. His presence becomes symbolic rather than personal. He is no longer the focus of reflection. The system is. The delay is. The endurance of truth is. What remains is not anger, but vigilance. A shared understanding that justice does not announce its arrival, it accumulates quietly until it can no longer be ignored. The story reaches a point where it no longer expands, but stabilizes, settling into a form that resists distortion. It is now resistant to myth, to exaggeration, to simplification. The facts are enough. They always were. In professional circles, the case is referenced without emotion. That absence is not disrespect. It is maturity. It signals that the lesson has been fully absorbed. The victim's name continues forward not as a headline, but as a marker of endurance. Her story is no longer about how long justice took, but about the fact that it did not disappear. The phrase cold case carries less weight of hopelessness now. It sounds more like a challenge, a reminder that the timeline of truth is not always aligned with the timeline of human attention. And in that misalignment, patience becomes the most powerful tool of all. What ultimately defines this story is not the crime, nor the arrest, nor even the verdict, but the refusal to let time rewrite reality. The solved cold case stands as a quiet correction to the idea that forgetting is inevitable. It proves that memory, when preserved properly, does not decay. It waits. The systems shaped by this case continue to operate long after its details fade from conversation. Procedures remain. Standards hold. Decisions made today reflect lessons learned decades ago. Somewhere, another cold case is still waiting. Not solved. Not visible. But intact. Its evidence preserved. Its truth patient. This is the final echo of the California 1994 case. Not an ending, but a signal. That silence is not absence. That time is not protection. And that no matter how long it takes, the truth does not disappear. It waits. Time does not end a case. It rearranges it. It strips away urgency, erodes noise, and leaves behind only what was real enough to survive being ignored. The California 1994 cold case reaches this phase quietly, no longer debated, no longer defended, existing now as a fixed point in the long argument between truth and time. Inside law enforcement, its influence becomes instinctive. Decisions are made differently now, not because someone invokes the case aloud, but because its lesson has fused with professional judgment. Evidence is treated less like property and more like testimony deferred. Every item is assumed innocent of irrelevance until proven otherwise. This shift changes outcomes in cases that never reference 1994 at all. A bloodstain preserved instead of discarded. A fiber logged instead of ignored. A box sealed instead of cleared. Small choices accumulate, and somewhere down the line, another truth survives long enough to be heard. The victim's family no longer measures time in anniversaries of pain. They measure it in distance traveled. How far the case has moved away from daily life. How rarely it interrupts memory. Closure, they learn, is not a door that shuts. It is a sound that fades. In the community, the case becomes a quiet boundary marker. A reminder of what happens when certainty outruns evidence. Parents tell their children the story not to frighten them, but to explain why patience matters, why systems must be built to endure boredom as much as crisis. The cold case, once frozen, now functions as a warning flare left behind for future investigators. Not dramatic. Not glowing. Simply present. Impossible to ignore once you know where to look. There is a moment every long-resolved case reaches when it stops belonging to anyone. It no longer belongs to detectives, or prosecutors, or even families. It becomes institutional memory, embedded so deeply that removing it would weaken the structure itself. The 1994 case reaches that moment without ceremony. It slips into policy language, into training slides, into the pauses between decisions. It teaches without speaking. What stands out in hindsight is not how long justice took, but how easily it could have vanished. A single disposal order. A mislabeled box. A budget cut at the wrong moment. The case survived not because of brilliance, but because of restraint. That realization humbles the system. It reframes success as survival rather than speed. The solved cold case is no longer held up as a triumph, but as a narrow escape from permanent silence. The man responsible continues to fade, reduced to a procedural fact. His name matters less than the chain of custody that outlived him. His actions are no longer the story. The system's patience is. In quiet rooms across the country, other families wait with questions that feel identical to those once asked in California. They do not know this case personally, but they benefit from its endurance. It has altered the odds on their behalf. Justice, in this context, is no longer dramatic. It is architectural. Built slowly. Designed to last. What remains now is a recalibrated understanding of time itself. The cold case teaches that time is neither enemy nor ally. It is a test. It reveals which truths are strong enough to survive neglect, which systems are disciplined enough to preserve without promise of reward. The California 1994 case passed that test. Barely. Its final legacy is not the arrest, not the DNA match, not the stunned investigators. Those are milestones, not meaning. The meaning lies in what followed. In the restraint that became habit. In the patience that replaced panic. In the refusal to equate silence with failure. The phrase cold case now carries a different tone. It is no longer a grave marker. It is a holding pattern. A state of readiness rather than surrender. Somewhere, another box waits on a shelf. Another file sits unread. Another family wonders if time has already decided against them. This story answers quietly. Time does not decide. People do. And when they choose preservation over erasure, patience over panic, truth over closure, even decades are not enough to keep the past buried. The case was solved. The lesson remains active. There is a strange calm that settles after a case has taught everything it can teach. Not relief. Not celebration. Just a steady awareness that something irreversible has taken place. The California 1994 cold case now exists in that space, no longer unfolding, but no longer finished either, because its consequences continue to move outward, quietly shaping decisions that will never mention its name. Inside police departments, the case has altered the definition of failure. An unsolved case is no longer seen as a dead end, but as a condition that demands stewardship. Evidence is not judged by its immediate usefulness, but by its capacity to survive. Survival becomes the metric. Investigators learn to sit with uncertainty without rushing to silence it. They learn that unanswered questions do not weaken authority, but strengthen credibility. The case teaches them that truth delayed is not truth denied, as long as the path remains intact. The victim's absence is still felt, but it no longer dominates the narrative. Her life is remembered in fragments that are no longer framed by fear. The story surrounding her has stopped expanding. It has stabilized. That stability is what allows memory to breathe. The community carries the case like a scar that no longer aches but still informs movement. It reminds them where systems broke down and where they held. It reminds them that danger is not always visible, and justice is not always immediate. This is the stage where a cold case stops being history and becomes instinct. What most people never see is the silence between breakthroughs. Years where nothing happens. Phones do not ring. Files are not opened. The California case lived in that silence for decades, and that silence did not weaken it. It purified it. Every theory that could not survive time collapsed. Every false lead eroded. What remained was only what was real enough to endure neglect. That endurance, more than any technology, is what solved the case. This realization unsettles investigators. It suggests that justice is not always about doing more, but about doing less at the right moment. About resisting the impulse to conclude simply to relieve pressure. In courtrooms, the case has changed how age is perceived. Old evidence is no longer dismissed as compromised by time. Instead, time itself is treated as a filter. If something remains after decades of inaction, it demands attention. The convicted man's story continues to shrink. His identity fades into irrelevance. He is no longer a figure of fascination. He is context. Meanwhile, the phrase cold case grows heavier with meaning. It no longer signals abandonment. It signals suspension. A deliberate refusal to decide too soon. At some point, the case stops asking questions and starts answering them, not about the crime, but about the system that allowed it to wait without disappearing. The California 1994 cold case answers in a voice that is calm, almost indifferent, because truth does not need urgency once it is secure. The greatest achievement of the case is not resolution. It is continuity. The chain was never broken. Custody was maintained. Memory was preserved. This continuity changes how future cases are built from the first moment. Investigators now think in decades, not days. They document with the assumption that someone else, years from now, may need to understand every choice they made. The victim's name remains, no longer as a headline, but as a fixed point. Proof that even when attention moves on, responsibility does not have to. Somewhere, another cold case waits in the dark, untouched, intact. Its time has not come yet. But because of what happened in California, its chances are better than they were before. That is the quiet power of this story. Not that it ended, but that it endured.